You might think your Christmas symbols are very Christian, but actually, they aren't. A lot of what we celebrate as being Christian has its roots in paganism. Even Judaism is rooted in earth-based spirituality. Welcome to Truly Terrified, Paranormal versus Physics, where we talk about some really weird stuff, and Joe the scientist explains how it's not possible, or maybe it is. I'm Lynn, and...
I'm Joe.
All right, let's start with the Christmas tree. That's an easy one.
Yes, very easy.
Pagans displayed evergreen branches as a reminder that spring would come again, because they're green in the middle of winter. Romans placed them around temples to honor Saturn, the god of agriculture. And in the 16th century, German Christians brought those trees inside their homes as a symbol of everlasting life. When news spread that Queen Victoria and her husband, Prince Albert, who was not in a can, but he was German, set up a Christmas tree in the palace. The practice suddenly became the height of Christmas fashion in England and America. So Christmas trees were not even a thing for Christian Christmas until...
Did he say why he did that? Because it's pretty strange. I mean...
Prince Albert?
It's not strange necessarily to bring a tree in your house and decorate it. Not necessarily. But since people already were doing that...
Well, I think that, as with many things we've discovered over the last 3 episodes, even back in Halloween episodes, Christians co-opt the pagan rituals for whatever reasons. You know, we've touched on some of those reasons why we think they may have done it, but whatever reason, they co-opted them. And so the pagans have been sticking these evergreen branches in their house.
Well, so also, when I look this kind of stuff up, they did also have what's called a Yule tree, a whole tree.
Yeah.
And there's probably evergreen tree, because why would you, in the middle of winter, you wouldn't have
right. So
a
Yule
deciduous tree.
Is actually the celebration of the winter solstice.
Yeah.
So that is a pagan ritual.
It's kind of one of those things where it's like all the little facets get tied together weirdly. So like there's the god whoever, and he was also called Jewel or Joel or something. And then there's Yuletide, Joeltide. And so as usual, it's like you have something concrete, it becomes abstracted, and then it's turned into something, it's reified back to something concrete, and that just happens. So it's like it's now raining, abstract, it's God,
right.
There's the gods raining, and then you have the god of the valley raining.
Okay, so I just looked up Yule, and I read this before, but I want to get it right. So it's a winter festival historically observed by the Germanic people and was incorporated into Christmas during the Christianization of the Germanic people.
Yeah.
So there's some other very old Greek things that go around that, like the god Joel, or
I think it was
it is.
Odin, maybe.
Yeah. So
that was just one of the early names for Odin.
Well, we'll see. I don't.
It's so complicated because you're talking about language barriers.
Yeah.
Talking about language evolution, different religious beliefs. So it's like the Christians, how they claim all of this stuff. Mm-hmm. Them claiming it is almost a denial, and it might be an outright denial that there were ever any pagan rituals like Yule.
So here we have this, it's the middle of winter, and it's the darkest, the darkest day, the longest night in the year.
In Scandinavia, it would have been the darkest
It would have been, yes, it would have been.
It would have been, to me, horrible.
Yes, it would have been horrible. So you can see that candles and fire would represent hope, warmth, rebirth in the pagan winter solstice traditions around the world. And even the Jewish Hanukkah menorahs, and they've got their own stories about why they light the candles, but even those, though, that eventually merged with Christian traditions. All of it. Christians took all of it. They took the candles, they took the fire, they took the menorahs, they took it all. and claimed it for Christianity.
I think in a sense, Christianity was kind of like the Roman religion,
Yeah.
But the Roman Empire was big, and it was complicated, and so its religion is gonna be big and complicated.
Yeah.
I think. And I mean, and them kind of subsuming all of this area and different traditions and forcing themselves on people basically guarantees you have fusions of things.
Right. So another symbol that we often see at Christmas time is the star. And the star...
Is it officially called the Star of David or something?
Well, no, there's the Star of David, which is not associated with Christianity,
okay.
but the star...
Oh, that's a Jewish thing.
Yeah,
isn't it?
the star is... it symbolizes the star that was seen above the manger when Jesus was born.
The North Star.
And
Polaris.
they don't call it the North Star.
It has a name, doesn't it?
I don't know. The star was what the three wise men saw that led them to know that a king had been born, and they followed the star.
If we don't know what star it was, then knowing the star would be really interesting.
Well, let me tell you, every few hundred years, Jupiter and Saturn appear as one to the naked eye. It's called It's called a great conjunction. It last occurred in December 2020. Unfortunately, I didn't know about it, so I didn't get to see this because that would have been really cool to see such a thing.
But they'll next occur like in 500 years or something?
Every few hundred years, yeah. So who knows?
Wow.
Undoubtedly, ancient pagan people would have noticed that phenomenon. They would have noticed this because there was no light pollution. They used the stars. Yes.
Yeah.
Some scientists theorize that a planetary conjunction like that would have been what started the whole Star in the East story. It was the magnificent scientific convergence of two planets.
So they're saying,
reflecting the light as if one large star.
Looking backward, predicting backward, that there would have been a convergence around that time.
Yeah.
So maybe some people saw it and then it fused into Christianity.
Right. Some people saw it.
Presuming the story that the wise men didn't follow it.
And just like false memories or the way we store our memories, something happens and it rewrites what our memory has stored before. It automatically rewrites. Our brains rewrite our history to fit with this new thing that we've learned. And so if, story gets around, there was this amazing thing in the sky, a star where there hadn't been a star before, and it was huge and bright, and people could then say, well, we followed that star, and whatever.
Okay, where were we?
Okay, so that was the star.
Not the Star of David, the star of Jupiter and Venus converging.
The star in the east. It's the great convergence of Jupiter and Saturn.
Oh, Jupiter and Saturn. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Because I think it's Venus is the brightest quote-unquote star.
Yeah, I think so.
Be interesting to see what that would look like.
Well, there obviously would be things that we could find online because it happened in 2020.
Yeah.
Another one is the story of the Christmas spider.
What?
Yes. Now, bear with me. Just stick along with me for a minute. So the story goes that this woman, pagan woman, brought the tree or the branches inside at night for Christmas or for the story goes that this pagan woman brought pine boughs or a tree inside her home, and they decorated it with whatever you decorated with back then. Who knows if they even decorated it a lot. But in the morning, there were silvery strands all over it because the spider had been in there and wove its web all over the tree. And it was beautiful. So one of the things that then people did was they would try and emulate the spider web on their
so you now have
winter
garland.
Solstice. So now we have tinsel.
Whatever.
And in Germany, Poland, and Ukraine, if you find a spider on your Christmas tree, it's considered extremely good luck.
Doesn't that mean we should be making spiders and putting fake spiders on our tree?
I think absolutely we should have
like a paper mache.
Yeah, we should have little gold
even
and silver.
cutouts.
We should have spiders on our trees. Absolutely, it's good luck.
That no one would understand if they came in.
No, they would not. I have had commercial ornaments that were purchased this way that I thought were stylized stars, but after looking at a bunch of different examples of things that people have put on their trees, I realized that they're actually spider webs. And if you think about, like the little rays that come out from a star, only that's got the spider web connections on it. So
that makes sense out of the pipe cleaner craft material
right
stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So now I know better, and I do think we need a spider on our Christmas tree, and we need spider webs. So maybe after Halloween we'll buy some different
it would work
things.
Doubly.
Yeah,
you could put up the tree and completely coat it in spider webs.
Yeah, and then
remove some of them for Christmas.
We don't really have to worry too much about what someone would think because nobody ever comes in here except family. All right, the next thing that I looked up was wreaths, because wreaths are, that's something that people put on their front doors and hang around their homes or mantles or whatever. And it even people do it for like Easter. They make a holiday, an Easter wreath, and all sorts of different things, a fall wreath, a spring wreath. So wreaths are a big deal, but especially at Christmas time. It's like, you put the pine around in a circle and you decorate it with symbols of Christian Christmas. This is interesting. In ancient Greece and Rome, victorious athletes wore leafy branches. And you can see that in your brain, what they would wear on their heads. Yeah. The laurel wreath. Woven into a crown on their heads, and that showed that they were the winners, man. They were the top athletes. The symbol of a never-ending circle made of evergreens also offered the promise of spring's rebirth to pagans. So pagans did it too. Well, that was another one that was co-opted for Christmas, and people don't even realize. Not that they even have to realize. Who really cares? I mean, just have fun with it, because to me, Christmas is not a religious holiday at all. It's just a fun holiday.
And that's the thing. No matter what, it doesn't matter what you believe. You're still going to have fun doing the stuff. Right.
So I think that was really cool, that the wreath symbolizes that the days are going to get longer again. Green plants will grow again from the earth. You're not stuck in never-ending hellish winter. And
it is interesting.
Victorious athletes.
Because those kind of things, like you could predict a lot, I think you could predict without any knowledge, a lot of the traditions that humans have in the extreme northern hemisphere, just because that there is winter and there are deciduous plants. Oh, and one more other fact. When you're in dark for a lot longer than usual, supposedly that encourages depression.
Oh, yeah.
So when it's dark, it's cold, not natural for people. There's plants that they're alive now. So, you have this reminder that it's going to get green again. Here are the plants that don't lose their leaves. It's all depressing. It's all dark. It's the winter solstice. Oh, look, now things are going to start getting better again.
Yeah.
It's a perfect setup for the one time of the year for the best celebration.
Yeah. Yeah. And it gets you through that hump of that darkness that makes people feel sad and lonely and all of those other things. The other thing about the plants is it's not just like, I like to grow things. I like gardening. They relied on what they could grow for survival. So growing things, the growing season was survival itself. And so to enter into a period of time when you couldn't grow things, that was very dicey. They had to rely on what they stored. They had to rely on how to keep warm. There were lots of different nuances that go into that goes beyond just, I'm so depressed. The days are really short and, and I feel isolated here in my little cozy house. No, it was life or death. It was very, very scary times probably for people back then, because they relied on greenery, they relied on warmth, they relied on those things to survive, not just for pleasure.
Supposedly there's also a rebound when you are unhappy or you're depressed or whatever. It's like your brain is now more sensitive to other emotional states. So when there's anything that would push you into those, like it's now spring, it's becoming lighter.
Oh, yeah.
You go really hard towards the other end of the spectrum. Yeah. So again, it's like, oh, now we're coming out of it, and it feels really good.
Which also might explain what's the festival in Brazil? Carnival.
Carnival, yeah. So, and then it all comes back to the winter solstice.
Yeah. Yep.
And it's the winter. It's like, forget Yule, forget Christmas, whatever. It's the winter solstice. That's the thing.
Yeah.
That's the point.
Yeah. So another one is bells. Now, we know that bells are rung from church towers, and people who go around caroling door to door rang bells, and we put bells on our Christmas trees. Bells seem pretty much a symbol of Christmas. But bells in pagan times, in their traditions, they would ward off evil spirits, which is why it's not unusual to look at old paintings of old pagan rituals and see people ringing bells, because they're actually warding off evil spirits. And I wonder if that's where the traditions of other bell ringing come from. You know, in Christian traditions, maybe they're not thinking those things. They're just thinking this is a jolly sound and it's good news, I'm ringing a bell, Jesus has been born. But the roots of it being to ward off evil spirits, I thought was really pretty interesting. Again, co-opted by Christianity.
And also consider this like spirits thing, similar to Halloween, because you're scaring off the whatever. And there you have, it's like, okay, you were unlucky one day. Abstraction to like a spirit, like in a nominal spirit. It's the spirit of the bad luck,
Yeah.
But then back concretized to a literal, like a thing, a being,
right.
A spirit.
Well, think about it. If you didn't really understand why things happen, like you didn't understand why people got sick, you didn't understand why tornadoes came or anything like that.
I think do they have tornadoes in Europe?
No, but there were
rare.
People living in America pre-Christianity.
True.
So if you didn't understand those things, you would come up with explanations that made sense to your own mind, within your own community, within your own level of experience of life. And one of those things would be, well, if you don't understand it, it must be something beyond my understanding. It must be something of a spiritual nature. So yeah, ring a bell, make it go away. And if you ring a bell, you're doing something. You feel like you're doing something proactively.
And you have like
to protect
stuff like
yourself.
placebo effect.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Or, this is paranormal podcast, or there really were spirits and they were getting rid of them.
Well, there's that. I tend to think that most paranormal things that are going on that people perceive as being paranormal are really probably just products of their own imagination. I really do.
Aren't you supposed to be the believer?
I am a believer. And this is why I feel so passionately that we can't trivialize this stuff and make up crap. It's like I said in the last episode. When people say, oh, this was, some crazy thing that occurred and there were spirits wandering around, that really kind of takes away any serious inquiry into it, because then you've got it muddied with all this crazy talk about silly stuff. Yeah, I really believe that whatever a person is, whatever makes them who they are, some essence of that survives after physical death. I absolutely believe it. I absolutely believe that there are ways that things and people can communicate over distances without any understandable means. Absolutely. Do I believe that Krampus is wandering the earth? No. And so to believe that, number one, I have to honor those people who didn't have an explanation for certain things or wanted to have a system of control because they had to control people in their community or else things went haywire. I have to accept that and respect that that was their method of doing it, while still simultaneously saying, oh my God, come on. Krampus, are you kidding me? Speaking of Krampus, during the Yule season, pagan children would leave out food at night in hopes of getting presents from Odin, the all-powerful
Makes
Norse
sense.
god. He traveled around on his 8-legged horse. I think it's...
Eight-legged?
8-legged horse. I think it's
Spider
Sleipnir.
stuff again.
Yeah. Sleipnir?
Sleipnir. Yeah, I
Sleipnir?
remember hearing that name before.
Well, now children leave out milk and cookies for Santa Claus. Maybe, though, it's a way to prevent any of his evil sidekicks from doing them in.
Yeah, distract him with
Yeah.
sweets and...
Yeah, exactly.
You're saying that about Sleipnir reminded me, I saw something, the Yule tree, I guess in some beliefs, was related to the tree of life and Yggdrasil, the world tree, which is also interesting. So we have Christmas tree, which was stolen probably definitively from pagan beliefs in Scandinavia and probably and elsewhere.
In Germany.
And they had a specific belief about Yggdrasil. So it's like, okay, who do you believe? Christians who have like a not very specific reason why they do Christmas trees, and then a belief system that's like really specifically.
Yeah. I think Christians, if you were to ask your mainstream Christian, why do you have a Christmas tree at Christmas? They would say something like, it is a symbol of everlasting life, which Jesus died for our sins so that we would have everlasting life. I think that's probably what they would say.
I'm not ripping on Christianity or anything, but it is a really great skill to just bullshit anything. You know what I mean? Like someone gives you something and you create, consciously or unconsciously, you create a narrative that supports you. Like that is a tremendously useful skill. Could you imagine being like an ancient person and having that skill?
That's probably where a lot of things
control
came
everything.
From. Well, yeah. I'm Moses. I went up on this hill and came down with giant stones.
Yeah.
And on these stones are written all the rules.
Cross the swamp?
Yeah.
Oh, it was the whole thing was parted for me.
According to legend, the ancient gods used mistletoe to resurrect Odin's son Baldur from the dead. So we're back to Odin. Baldur's mother, Frigg, was the goddess of love. And she made the plant a symbol of love and vowed to kiss anyone who passed under it. So now we have mistletoe that we hang, and if you're underneath it, you're supposed to kiss the person who's standing underneath it. The plant also ties into the holiday season because it can bloom even when it's cold outside.
It's evergreen.
It's just always blooms. In Nevada, it does not look like the depictions you see or the stuff you buy in the store. It is
a different species.
It is a grayish with white berries.
Elsewhere they're red, right?
Some places they're red, yeah. It's and in Nevada it grows on bushes out in the desert. I mean, it's everywhere. Mistletoe is everywhere.
Yeah.
So I could see that here's another plant, stays green all year, blooms even in the middle of winter, and then you've got this story about, it's the goddess of love proclaimed that, we would hang it over your head, and if you pass underneath it, you can kiss the person. Unfortunately, during Christmas celebrations in 18th century England, men were allowed to kiss any woman who was standing under the mistletoe. And if that lady refused, it meant bad luck. So they would force themselves upon any woman who was standing under mistletoe. Wow. Is that gross?
I guess you definitely don't want to stand under mistletoe.
Yeah, but I don't know if you've ever been to a party or somebody's house or some situation where somebody had hung mistletoe. They usually hang it in such a way that it's not like big signs and arrows. This is mistletoe.
It's like hidden.
Stand here. It's very inconsequential. And so you could be standing there talking to somebody and not realize, they could have tied mistletoe to the top of that. Who thinks they're going to, do you have to walk around, like completely do a look over the entire room you're in, make sure somebody hasn't hung mistletoe so that you're not
suppose you could do like a walk through
assaulted?
And look up. You know what I mean?
You shouldn't have to.
True.
Nobody should be forcing themselves on
Though
you.
keep in mind, the whole feeling and everything at different points in history is probably vastly incompatible with the feeling of your present situation.
Right.
So I don't even think you can import much of anything in terms of feeling from how you feel now to any other time.
So my modern indignation would probably be completely irrelevant in those times.
The women themselves back then might not understand.
Right.
I mean, imagine they would, to some degree somehow, but they might not. I mean, it might be just totally foreign.
That's true. Here's one that is like your personal favorite. Fruitcake. Fruitcake is actually just cake. And it's filled with foods that have been stored from the growing season, like dried fruits and nuts and things. And they just stick it in the batter and cook it up. And they use alcohol to preserve it.
Yeah.
So
it all makes sense, right?
Yep. So in the middle of winter, fruitcake is not like a confection of fancy confection. It's survival food. It's what you have produced and put up for the winter time.
And I mean, it tastes great, and back then it would have tasted differently, but it's like an aggregate of a bunch of stuff baked into a cake.
Yeah.
And then with preservatives all over it, alcohol.
Yeah.
So it makes perfect sense.
Yes, and the alcohol, if there was any alcohol left in the liquor that they poured on it, it would probably make you feel good. And the sugar from the fruits, the dried fruits, would make you feel good. And the nuts, protein in the nuts, would give you strength. Yeah,
so it warms you, it tastes good, it keeps well. Like all of these things, I swear, Christmas should be expected. Christmas, Yule, solstice time. It would be surprising if you worshipped a cactus, or like you had a dog festival or something at that time. It's not surprising at all to have a preserved cake.
Right. I'm not saying that Christians shouldn't be allowed to celebrate these things. What offends me is that they've twisted it around. And if you ask Christians today, I would guess that almost all of them would not understand that these are pagan rituals that they're practicing. They would think that they have deep Christian meaning in their faith system, that it is a totally Christian Christmas thing that they're doing, when in reality it's not. And so I just have a problem with people being ignorant.
To me, it's like somebody who is overly pedantic, right? It's not necessary, their pedantry, right? For like 99% of cases. And practically speaking, we didn't need ever to know any of this to celebrate Christmas. You don't need to know about Jesus. You don't need to know about anything, because it's just, you do it. It's fun. Doesn't matter. You don't need a belief system at all.
Right.
And that makes it really easy for Christians themselves to celebrate it, as it makes it easy for everyone to celebrate it. It's like, okay, what is Christmas about? Jesus was born that day. It's really easy to say that, and I don't even know. It's probably not even historically accurate.
It's not.
It doesn't matter. It's like those kind of things, saying, oh, it's Jesus' birthday or whatever. It's just an embellishment. That's just superficial details. It's like Thanksgiving. What's Thanksgiving mean? You just stuff your face with food that you don't eat any other time of year. It doesn't matter that you had the Native Americans, the Pilgrims, whatever. Maybe it's not even true. It doesn't even matter. We could say it was aliens and werewolves.
True.
Doesn't matter. It's really easy to spout that off, though, even if it's not true.
Yeah.
I have no idea anything about North Hemisphere Native Americans, Russian native people, like Northeast Russia, like Mongolians or Chinese, Northern Hemisphere indigenous people. My prediction is there's a lot of elements from their indigenous beliefs or traditions that match up exactly with Christmas and Yule and all that.
Yes. In China, a thousands of year old festival that's celebrated generally December 21st, 22nd, or 23rd. So right around winter solstice. Is celebrated with family gatherings and a big meal. It marks the end of the harvest season and also has roots in the Chinese concept of yin and yang. After the solstice, the abundance of darkness in winter will begin to be balanced with the light of the sun. So that's kind of cool.
Is there any specifics?
There were, but I couldn't pronounce the words. And so I didn't...
was there anything like they put out an idol? Or
no, I didn't see anything like that.
Like a icon, like a star or anything like that?
Oh, I should have looked into it deeper. I didn't look into that. But so consider what stars would be most obvious in December. And there are stars that are most obvious in December. And also consider that because it's dark longer.
In the northern hemisphere.
In the northern hemisphere. And because it's dark longer, people have more of an opportunity to look into the sky. So it would make sense that they would, a star might be incorporated into their belief system. All of those things. We know that Chinese people used bells. So all of those things are probably true.
Well, I think the elements I'd look for particularly are evergreens, like preservatives, food stuff that's related to storing the harvest and the overcoming darkness as it's now becoming light. Specifically because that's what you get in winter.
Okay, it's called, and I'm going to butcher all these words, so forgive me, proactive. Dongzi Festival, which means Winter Solstice Festival. Actually, Dongzi literally means winter's extreme. So they make and eat Tengwan, and they worship their ancestors. So let me see if I can find what Tengwan is. In Chinese, the word Dong means winter, while Zi means arrival, giving the literal meaning of the festival, the coming of winter. Dongzi celebrates the winter solstice. It was also believed by some that it was the day the kitchen god went to heaven to report to the Jade Emperor the conduct of a family.
Interesting.
So we have a little bit of the Santa Claus seeing if you're good or bad.
Oh, yeah,
Here,
maybe.
the kitchen god goes to heaven and reports the conduct of a family. This was first celebrated by the Chinese people during the Zhou dynasty, which was 1045 BC to 256 BC, and then it was declared an official celebration in 206 BC. So the people would take a break from work and celebrate with their families. They would honor their ancestors by burning joss paper at shrines to show gratitude. Some of the other things they did is the businesses would let the employees off early to spend time with their families, and shops would close. They would light incense at dawn. They would eat together.
Are there any symbols?
I'm getting to it. I'm just going through it. They would make and eat tangguan, which is balls of glutinous rice, which symbolizes reunion. They sometimes colored those pink or green. And those balls were cooked in a soup or broth and served in one bowl, and so everybody would sit around. It was also served with a mildly alcoholic unfiltered rice wine, and they'd eat winter solstice dumplings. The dumplings were shaped like ears.
That's weird.
And it was said that they expelled the cold. They also molded the dumplings into the shapes of dogs and cats and other animals. Okay, so a common superstitious belief said that if married people should leave 2 uneaten dumplings and their wishes would come true, and a single person should leave just 1 for an auspicious new year.
Sort of analogous, maybe, to the cookie thing.
Okay, so they would gather at their ancestral temples to worship on that day, and then they'd have a grand reunion dinner following the ceremony. They'd have wontons, those dumplings. It was also a reminder that everyone was a year older and they should behave better. That goes along with the Santa Claus thing.
Santa Claus, yeah.
And all those other evil friends of his. They would have a 9-layer cake as a ceremonial sacrifice. So when they went to the temple, they would bring the 9-layer cake. That was a ceremonial sacrifice.
And they just left it there?
And they would make it in the shape of a chicken, dog, tortoise, pig, cow, or sheep. I don't know. I don't know if they left it there.
That would suck. Could you imagine making cake and then leaving it somewhere? Can't eat it.
So there were lots of tonic. It seems like it was mostly food related. I'm going to say bells and see if something comes up. And then I'll say stars. Those are the dumplings. That looks gross.
That actually does look
That
really
looks
gross.
really
Maybe
gross.
if it dried out a little. I mean, they're dumplings. They
Yeah.
wouldn't. So if you look at Scandinavia, Scandinavia is like not that big, but you have a whole bunch of different beliefs. And I have to imagine the same thing is happening like in China, that area. There's a whole bunch of different regions with their own local beliefs. And that is just kind of a skimming the top of it.
Yeah, and because this is,
Maybe
I am literally just skimming these articles
Yeah.
really fast.
And I'm sure it would be similar for if you looked up Native American, Native
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Russian.
Okay, so now we get to Stonehenge, which is what would you call it, a monument? And nobody
It's-
knows really why it was built or how it was used.
It's a wonder of the world.
There's no denying, however, that it lines up with the movements of the sun. They know that is true.
Uh-huh.
It is also one of the global monuments that was built around the summer solstice. So something spectacular happens with the way it lines up with the sun on the summer solstice, which is the other side of the winter solstice. It's the longest daylight hours, whereas winter solstice is the shortest daylight hours. Archaeological research suggests the winter solstice festivals happened there as well as the summer solstice festivals. So there were other things going on there besides just summer stuff. And now this is really cool. So modern people have taken to this tradition and they gather at dawn at the Stonehenge monuments and wait for the sun to rise and witness this magical occurrence when the sun rises through the stones. And it's just supposed to be absolutely fantastic.
Well, it's like right in the center of the stones or something.
I'm not exactly sure. I've seen pictures of it, and I'm not exactly sure how it lines up, but it's something different happens than what happens during the summer solstice. And the unusual thing is that usually they have it all roped off. You can't walk up to the stones. But at that morning, the first morning after the winter solstice, visitors can walk right up to the stones and be able to,
So that's like a
enjoy
popular
it.
time tourists
Yes.
go and
It's they consider it a peaceful and sacred winter solstice celebration, and that would be completely pagan. Now, we talked about China. Let's talk about Japan. The winter solstice in Japan is called Toji and has a few interesting customs associated with it. Traditionally, a winter squash called kabocha is eaten. It's pretty obvious why they would eat kabocha, because winter squash keeps really well. It's a hard rind squash. You can put it in a cool place and it will keep over the entire winter. I've had pumpkins and other hard squash keep for months and months and months. So that was probably one of only a few crops that would have been available in winter. I mean, that obviously had probably rice, those sorts of things, but squash would be something that without any other external means of being able to keep something, they'd be able to keep it. So this is interesting. After they eat their kabocha, they take a hot bath called yuzu with citrus fruits in it, and that is supposed to ward off illness. It soothes dry winter skin. But here's my favorite part, and this isn't ancient at all, but I just love this part. In the 1960s, capybaras, which are a relative of guinea pigs, they're huge. They look like giant guinea pigs, and I love guinea pigs. So this large guinea pig relative was imported into Japan. And then they discovered that the capybaras loved yuzu too. And so on winter solstice, some Japanese zoos, not all of them, some of them will throw fruit into the warm water the animals soak in on the winter solstice so they can have their yuzu bath.
if I was a capybara, I would love that.
Yes, I just love them. I just love guinea pigs and capybaras. Okay, so we've talked about Christianity a lot, but let's talk about the Jewish faith. And I don't know a lot about it. I know a little bit. So I did a little research on how they honor the winter solstice. Now, obviously, Hanukkah falls about that same time of year. In the Talmud, which is their religious writings, when Adam saw the daylight gradually growing shorter, he said, "Woe is me, perhaps because I sinned. The world around me is growing darker and darker and is about to return to chaos and confusion. And this is the death heaven has decreed for me." He then sat 8 days in fast and prayer, and when the winter solstice arrived and he saw the days getting gradually longer, he said, "Such is the way of the world," and proceeded to observe 8 days of festivity. That would be Hanukkah. In the following years, he observed both the 8 days before and the 8 days following the solstice as days of festivity.
So it's officially 8 days before
8 days before
solstice
and 8 days...
or before the new year?
No, solstice. 8 days before solstice, 8 days after.
Obviously they don't correspond.
But Hanukkah actually has other meanings, but this I thought was very interesting of how they honored the winter solstice in their ancient text.
Mm-hmm.
So while much is made about the pagan roots of Christmas trees, we shouldn't neglect to notice the pagan roots of Hanukkah. And so by pagan, I mean a recognition of and ritual acknowledgement of the natural cycles of the world, which is all that means. So let's think about how the days are now growing longer and all the ways we celebrate that and how it brings us comfort and security. Let's welcome back the lengthening of days and how we, in our own power, light up the darkness that surrounds us. It is worthy of our celebration, whether it's Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever else you want to do. It is worthy.
Oh God, yes. I cannot wait for it to get lighter.
Our contact information is in the show notes. You can email us, text us, or even call and leave a 3-minute voicemail. And as always, if you have a story you want to tell, send it to us. And if you send us a story, we will comment on it in a future episode. Please share, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and never be so terrified you can't run.
You can't snowshoe away
From the hellish cold.